Welcome to the Superintendent's Hangout, where we discuss topics in education, charter schools, life in general, and not necessarily in that order. I'm your host, Dr. Sharetta. Come on in and hang out. In this episode, I was privileged to sit down with Lee Dulgeroff. Lee is Senior Executive Director for Facilities Planning and Construction at San Diego Unified School District, where he's been for approximately 20 years in positions related to that work. Lee and I have worked together for the past nearly 10 years on a very unique collaboration between school district and charter schools here in San Diego around voter-approved facilities bonds. Lee and I cover a range of topics from how enthusiastic he was as a young child and how interested he was in math and science and Legos and erector sets, how that then played forward into his education when he attended San Diego State University, and then on into the start of a career where originally he had not planned to work at all in education or school districts, but the very fortuitous events in his life that brought him into this realm, and then how enthusiastic he is every day to get up and go to work, the support systems in his life, how he manages his time, his interests, and much more. It was a distinct pleasure to speak with Lee. He is deeply knowledgeable not only about his particular work area of responsibility, but many, many facets of life. He is indeed a Renaissance man. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did having this conversation. Welcome, Lee. Thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your busy schedule this afternoon to chat.
It's good to be here. Thanks.
I was wondering if you could start with your personal and professional origin story, where you come from, what your start in life was like, and how those threads have led forward to where you are today, both personally and professionally.
Okay. Well, not too exciting. I consider myself almost a native-born San Diegan. I was born near Phoenix, Arizona, but we moved here when I was 2. So I've pretty much spent my whole life in and around all parts of San Diego. I kind of grew up in Claremont area, and then we moved to Cardiff, and I've lived in Poway, lived near Bay Park. I've been all parts of San Diego. So I was just kind of a typical kid, I think, growing up, going to school in San Diego. But things changed. My parents got divorced when I was 11, so we kind of ran into some hard times financially. So it kind of, I think I'd say I grew up like sort of lower middle class, not poor, but we had some struggles here and there. We ended up with my mom, moved to Poway, went to Poway High School, pretty much worked my way through high school and college. When I was 16, I was washing dishes and bussing tables. And I think some of those experiences kind of led me to be the person I am today, in terms of, having to, kind of work hard and struggle early on. And then went to San Diego State. I always kind of, I always was really kind of a mechanical type person. I used to play with Legos, and I had one of those erector sets of steel. I did a lot of that kind of stuff in as a young kid. Even as a little kid, I played with blocks and things. Somehow I'd like really good spatial skills. I don't know. It was just something that attracted me. I also did a lot of other things, but rode dirt bikes and things like that. But in I think middle school, I there was a summer school class that I was signed up for. It was called it was a computer programming class. And so I started programming when I was a 6th or 7th grader, I think, one of those summers. I want to say that between my 6th and 7th grade year, learned a code, and I got kind of interested in sort of coding, mechanical things, and I think that's what got me thinking I would be an engineer or a designer of some kind, you know.
And coding looked very different back then from what it is today, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We were using. We had an Apple IIe computer. That was and we had a Radio Shack TRS-80. Those are the two computers that our class used we were programming in BASIC.
Yeah.
Everything was on little floppy disks. So the memory, not nearly the memory, monochrome monitors. It wasn't any object-oriented programming. Graphics were very minimalist, command line interfaced. These are the days of like Pong and really rudimentary games. So,
Space Invaders,
yeah, all that, yeah, just really simple graphics, simple. And I had a Commodore 64. That was like 64 kilobytes of memory.
And that was cutting edge, right?
That was really hot stuff back then. I mean, that would have and you could do it color. It wasn't just monochrome. So that was like really cool. You could color. So I started doing that. I was really good in math and science in high school. I was decent in English too, and I knew I wanted to be an engineer at that point, so I was like looking at different schools. I got accepted on the East Coast to like Boston College and UCSD and San Diego State, but I wanted to be like a hands-on engineer, and also didn't, at the time, I didn't want my mom was willing to pay for college or help me pay for college, but it was a lot of money to go to the East Coast. So I ended up, I really was interested in aerospace engineering, so I focused on that, and computer science. So it was kind of a double major. And then I think my goal at the time was sort of like try to make the world a better place by inventing or creating things that would make the world a better place at the time. Didn't know what that was kind of my like sort of a life goal. Like what can I invent that'll make life easier for people type thing.
Did you have any role models in that regard, in the invention or seeing that around you?
Well, I had some mentors. Definitely. I had some mentors in college. I got an internship with a guy his name was Dr. Gordon Martin. He had a PhD in electrical engineering, physics, and mathematics. So he had 3 PhDs. He was like a really brilliant scientist. And then I also had some other mentors. I worked with some other scientific research people doing different things. But that internship and learning about how he approached science. And there are just some people that I met that could see further, than you just. And of course, I was just, sort of a young undergrad student, didn't really, but I had the knowledge to understand and appreciate what they were doing. Anyway, I had a fun time at San Diego State. Got, worked all through school, waited tables, working in the restaurants, and it helped me a lot, I think, with my people skills. I mean, it developed a lot of interpersonal skills. Met thousands of customers, some happy, some sad. Some good, some bad. And that played into my professional career, because I think to succeed, you need to have good communication skills, and it helps to have the technical skills and the communication skills together. Some people have one or the other. Some people have to work harder, one or the other. But I think that was important, an important ingredient in. And then finished. Let's see. After graduating, I started working as a defense contractor, doing different kinds of interesting projects for the government, various agencies.
Things we can't talk about in detail.
There were some things that I can't say
talk
too much.
about
But I think let's see. One of the projects I can tell you that we designed and built a factory to disassemble like napalm bombs that were left over from Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
It was like really interesting because you had to disassemble them and recycle everything, and it was out at Fallbrook. There were some, and different parts. I traveled all around the Southwest doing different types of projects, but that was a good experience for me. I started building, not just doing the design side of engineering, but also the customer, sort of being more of a project manager and working with the military customers and working with people. And they started getting me more involved on the, sort of the people side of our business. And then eventually I got to manage a small department, I guess, and then one day one of my former bosses called me up and said, hey, I need your help. I've got this, I'm working for this school district, and we have this capital program to like sort of rebuild schools. And I really need your help because we're way behind schedule, and we just need somebody. And at the time I said, well, what kind of work I do. I don't really have a lot of experience in with rebuilding schools. I built aircraft hangars and all kinds of things like that, but I didn't really know anything about schools. And he said, no, you're going to be perfect for this. We need you really bad. I need some good people. So, and I said, I was kind of, declined, and I tried to be he was very persistent, and which is another key to success is persistence. And so, he said, well, just come over and check it out. Just come check it out. Just try it out. And okay. So I came over and looked at what they were doing. I still was kind of skeptical about whether I fit in that program. But I decided to give it a try, because he was really a good guy. I really enjoyed working with him in the past. And so anyway, I started that path and just fell in love with the mission of, because I've always liked education. In my family, we have either teachers or engineers pretty much, and so I've always liked education. I've always thought of education as being the great equalizer, especially public education, and also sort of a pillar of a better future for our society, in so many different ways. So, and not being a teacher, I thought, well, what can I do to support education and support a better future? It kind of ties back into sort of, how do I build something to make the world a better place? And I guess I felt like, when I started to fall in love with the mission, I started feeling like I'm creating these spaces for teaching and learning to take place. And,
So now, approximately what year is that you?
This was right around 2000. Right around 2000, I'd been out of college for about a decade. I think I skipped over the part. I went and got a master's degree in computer information systems while I was working, doing sort of defense work, and went back, got a master's degree. Really, I thought maybe I'd do more of the programming side of things, or I was really interested in the sort of. And things were changing a lot at the time. I was really interested in building that, investigating that part of, I'd done a lot of it in engineering. So I thought, well, anyway, but yeah, right around 2000. And then, so then I started working at San Diego Unified, and we were able to take that program that was behind schedule. We were about 2 years into the program, and we were way behind. We were about 2 years behind almost. We had about a 10-year window to finish all this work, and we were able to finish on time and on budget for that first bond program.
Was that M?
That was Prop MM. Yeah.
MM. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I sort of, they'd ask me to do different things, and I just always tried to stay flexible, and so take on more and more different kinds of responsibilities. And then I think one day one of my bosses retired, and they asked me to kind of fill in, and I did, and it worked out. And then I became a director here at San Diego Unified. And then after that, I had another boss retire, and they asked me to fill in, and for as the interim like lead over this whole organization, and so I just that worked out, and they asked me to like sort of be the permanent person, and so I guess the rest is history. So I've been after Prop M, we passed 4 other bond measures and $11.6 billion of general obligation bond authorization to revitalize San Diego Unified Schools, and so I've been doing that. It's people say, it's not just about the money; it's more about the mission. We have a lot of aging buildings. I'd say the average age of our buildings is about 55 years old.
Wow.
We have 15.7 billion million square feet of school buildings, 2,500 acres of land. So there's spread out all over about 225 sites. So there's this big giant physical plant that's aging all the time. So it's this big dynamic problem. So we're trying to renovate all those school buildings. I mean, you think about the old Brooklyn elementary school site that Einstein is on. That's a really aging site. It had old buildings. They weren't code compliant anymore in a lot of areas. The physical plant was just tired, worn out. It had been loved by generations of students for 50 years, and it was time to sort of renovate and revitalize, and sometimes even tear down and replace the infrastructure there. And so that's an example, and that's just been one of many, many schools in the district that have over the years, just worn out and been loved and been used. So right now we're on the track to sort of rebuild it all, but it's not just rebuilding. It's also looking at how has education changed, and how are we preparing our students for the 21st century?
Yeah.
And creating teaching and learning spaces that respond to today's pedagogy, which is a fancy word for how things get taught, how things have, so now we're 50 years ago we didn't have Chromebooks, we didn't have Wi-Fi, we didn't have our cell phones, we weren't talking about artificial intelligence. There was nothing. A lot of the tools, a lot of things that we're doing in education is preparing our students for today and tomorrow. In terms of the physical environment and the infrastructure required to support it are much different than the classic, school building, that we had, in the, when I went to school. And then of course, even that's changed since public education started in the late 1800s or in California, at least. I mean, in other places started earlier than that.
So you've seen a lot of changes over your career and your life in terms of changes in San Diego as a city and a county, growth, modernization, demographic shifts. You've seen, obviously, San Diego Unified change demographically and in many ways. You've seen technology change. You went from dial-up or pre-dial-up to where we are today. If you started the district around year 2000, the advanced people were carrying Palm Pilots around, which were clunky early versions of a tablet, right? A personal tablet, all the way to what we have today. How do you make sure that on a personal level you stay abreast of these changes? Because you lead a big team, an important team. How do you personally do this without becoming overwhelmed?
Well, I think one of the things I enjoy is I like to listen to the news and to podcasts and things. I really am interested in world events. I'm more interested in geography. I'm more interested in trends. So I spend, it's not something I have to try to do, or I have to tell myself, oh, you got to read this.
You enjoy it.
I just enjoy it. Yeah. I like to stay I like to stay engaged, I do a lot of listening and it's just something. I'm just like a big sponge when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I'm, kind of an early adapter in some ways, not, I'll to different things, I drive an electric car, for example, which isn't, I guess a lot of people drive electric cars these days, so, there's, and with technology, with, computers and phones and things, I try to stay on the cutting edge of, and it's hard because kids, students these days are there's so many different avenues. There's so many different directions you could be on the cutting edge of, or you could be, there's so many different areas, whether it's, there's just so many different areas of interest that you could be. There are people that they watch Netflix all the time and they're really up on the latest shows and movies, and they watch all kinds of streaming. And so you talk to them and they know everything about that. And then there's people that listen to podcasts. There's people that are interested in video games and gaming. And then and it's not just about technology. Right. It's about, they're just people that there's so many different ways that you can connect with this world. And it's gotten so easy that no one person can be on the edge of,
right.
Involved in everything. But I listen a lot. I enjoy that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And it's interesting to me to reflect on the fact that while you were a math and science guy, that's a bit of a pigeonhole, but you said that those were your areas of strength and interest. You're actually in a job where you have to be a Renaissance man, because you have to understand everything from how communities organize and express their pleasure and displeasure, all the way to the technical specs on HVAC systems and everything in between. What are your leadership principles that you try to adhere to in leading this team? And first of all, how many folks report to you?
Well,
in the organization?
It varies all the time, because we have construction sites,
right?
Construction starting, but roughly like 350, 350.
So obviously it's impossible to be a micromanager in that. So you have to espouse certain principles that then permeate throughout your area of San Diego Unified. What are those principles that you adhere to in your work?
Well, I try to communicate well, to guide and influence people towards our mission, towards our goal. I want people to fall in love with the mission like I do, because I think if you're in love with the mission, if you're in love with the mission of education, like you are, I'm sure, it makes it a lot easier. I always encourage my team, even the ones that are like sort of central office based, where maybe they're doing contracts or something like that. I always encourage them to say, get out to the school sites, be there when you see the students in the new facilities, in the new buildings. I love to see the kids when we open up a new facility or a new school or something, and then you see them and it's what's changed for them, and it's just it helps you follow. It helps you continue to be energized and be in love with that mission of education, because. And you realize the role that you play in creating that space, that environment. So a lot of it is about communications, guidance, direction. I like to think that we're a big family. I think I like creating a family here. That's sort of another thing, another area. So people, I've had people that have left, like the grass might have been greener, or they thought it was greener, and they come back and they're like, oh, there's no place like, I like that, that we're a big team and that we're all kind of connected. So that's my leadership style is sort of, that is creating that energy, creating those connections, creating that big family.
What do you think has been your greatest professional success to date? And then after that, I'm going to ask you what's been the biggest challenge. So success.
Well, I don't want to name any one school or any one thing, but we've done some pretty amazing projects that have been received lots of awards. I mean, we had one year where we opened 5 new schools in one fall, a high school and middle school and 3 elementary schools. So I guess it's those big life-changing projects, I think, but I'd rather not preference one school or another because I love them all.
Right.
And, those are our biggest successes, I think. And it's not my success really.
The team.
It's the team. We there are so many people here that that work so hard to, it's not, no one person should take, credit for all of this work.
So the flip side of that, challenges, whether it's for you personally or probably team or, just department-wide challenges, because everything has its challenges, whether being misunderstood around something or
I think people problems are always the hardest problems to solve. Technical problems are they
don't talk back.
They don't talk back. Yeah. So typically you can solve those technical problems. Sometimes it takes time and money to solve a technical problem, but people problems are harder, and so I would say, whether it's people, our partners on the outside, they're maybe the neighborhood, the neighbors, or helping get everybody coalesced around an idea and making sure that everybody feels good about a project. Most of the time we build, when we're starting a project, there's fear. There's fear. There's fear of change. There's fear of, the unknown, if you will. And so it's overcoming that fear, overcoming sometimes objections. But usually when we finish a project, everybody comes back and says, wow, that worked out really well. I never thought it would turn out this. I mean, we get a lot of compliments, a lot of support. Rarely ever does somebody say, oh, I didn't expect this and it turned out to be, a negative for me. I mean, we do take, we're not perfect. We don't, that things don't always work out perfectly, but for the most part, it's those people challenges that are the toughest. I would say of all the, that's the biggest, and it's just, and that's where it comes back to communication and empathy and flexibility, I think.
And I'd imagine there's a side to your work, obviously in conjunction with others, but there's a political side to your work. Obviously, voter approved bond propositions require support from voters, and there's a messaging piece, and there's inevitably going to be people who understand and who don't understand, what things stand for, and also what it means to have funds for facilities that are separate from perhaps what happens statewide in our budget times, right? We know those are the realities of all of our work. Can you talk a little bit about how you navigate through those? So right now we're headed into a bit of a tricky budget time statewide. Anybody who follows education knows that that's the case in California. We have kind of a boom and bust model at the state level for funding schools, but yet the construction sources of monies that you're managing are on a trajectory that is not so impacted by that. Can you talk about how you navigate through that and also how you message that to the community?
Well, so starting out with the sort of the capital facility side. So as a district employee, my job is not to necessarily weigh in on political issues for or against. So when we do have a bond measure, we put together a bond measure on the and the board decides to put it on the ballot. It's staff's responsibility to educate to answer questions and educate voters. So we're not, trying to convince people to do one thing or another. with their ballot. We're more trying to educate them on this is what it will cost, but these are the benefits. This is this is what happens if it passes. This is what happens if it doesn't pass.
Right.
And one thing that I always try to help everyone understand is operating a big physical plant is, there's always a amount of wear and tear. So on buildings and things. And if you don't maintain your buildings, if you don't replace them when they start to wear out, if you don't replace a roof, for example, then you have dry rot and your damage, grows exponentially. So not maintaining a building is actually more expensive than maintaining a building because you end up losing the entire asset and you have to rebuild it from scratch.
Right.
It's better to maintain it and renovate it when it needs to be renovated from a practical standpoint. Now, if you just don't want to operate buildings at all, that's another choice. So that would mean eliminating the school itself.
Right.
I mean, not using the school. But if you're going to operate an educational system that requires buildings and shelter and technology and all the aspects of the infrastructure, then you need to maintain it. And it's actually less expensive. It's a better proposition to the taxpayer, to the citizen, to invest in and maintain and operate those buildings correctly. It also pays dividends. So if you think about giving teachers a better place to teach in and students a better place to learn, I think that indoor air quality, natural light, thermal comfort, all lead to better educational outcomes, which ultimately lead to a better society when you think about. And so there's a big payoff in investing in people in education because, so those are the kind of things that I try to share with people. And then of course, there's a cost to it. Sometimes we try not to overburden the taxpayer. A lot of times we're extending the existing tax rate, not necessarily increasing your taxes. So if you're happy with your taxes, all it does is simply extend it. But there is a cost, a societal cost to that. But I think the benefits outweigh the cost, but that's it's not. I'm not making typically not making an argument to, but in terms of there's certainly a political aspect to the work, and that in terms of education, you're absolutely right that the operational budget for education program, it is sort of ebbs and flows depending on the economic cycle that we're in. And the capital facilities needs, it's pretty much a steady state need that sort of ties into how many buildings, what that you're maintaining, and what type of systems are you maintaining. So that need and that cost never goes away. Yeah. So we use capital funds and bonds to finance the renovation of those things, which makes better sense than sort of the day-to-day funding of education, ebbing and flowing. I do wish the state would had a more stable system. Personally, as a citizen, a more stable system of funding education, so we didn't have boom and bust cycles like we do. I know that they try to establish rainy day funds and things like that. The government, the state government on a state government level. I wish the federal government would fund their underfunded mandates. I think the federal government should play a role if they're going to create mandates or requirements to local schools. Then those mandates ought to be funded and not just passed down. And the federal government does provide a lot of money, but not enough. And at the state level, certainly, I don't think if you think about what it would take to get a high quality private education, there's a big gap between what a high quality private privately funded education costs on a per annual basis and then what the state spends on a per student. Now, I'm not saying that we need to spend
2x or whatever.
Yeah. But I do think that every child deserves an equitable amount of support depending on their needs.
It's interesting to reflect on the fact that, obviously we're right now and the governor came out with his May revise. It was a strange May revise in the sense that there was some kind of non-committal talk about COLA and those kinds of things. But that there's a very, very small group of uber wealthy Californians, less than 200,000 out of 38 or 40 million. I'm not sure how many of those are taxpayers, but it's a rounding error population wise, who drive the state budget, right? And we know that during COVID, especially with interest rates where they were, that those folks were doing so well, and we had a massive windfall, right, at the state level. And colas were double digit, and then now we may not even hit 1% cola, right? There's talk between 0.75% and 1.06 or something. So it's just, to me, if we were to watch this from the outside, even a kindergartner could tell us that's not a really good way to plan something as important as funding education with these wild swings from one year to the next. So I guess we're fortunate that the voters have seen that vision to support educational facilities in San Diego over the long term. Can you talk in that regard a bit about the partnership between San Diego Unified, traditional district schools, and the charters that are authorized by the district, and how that's very unique in the state and I think even nationally with respect to these bond programs?
Yeah. So no, that's great. A great question. I feel like all of our students deserve an equitable support. I mean, if your child's in a newer school, maybe the school doesn't need as much help in terms of its facilities and its infrastructure. If your child's in an older school that's worn out, it needs more. And it really depends on, and it also depends on the pedagogy and what's happening at that school, how we best support it. Charter schools are no different. So in Proposition S, we actually named the charter schools. We named each charter school, and we had a project similar to what we do with a traditional public school. And for those charter schools that are located on district property. I mean, there are some charter schools that operate out of privately owned facilities and or storefronts or different types of spaces. And when it's a private facility, obviously public dollars aren't allowed to be spent to improve private property. But most of our charter schools are on district owned or public owned property. And so we had included those in our ballot measure and named them by name. When we started Proposition Z, we had some conversations with the charter school community, and we talked about a different approach. We talked about sort of a pro rata allocation of resources to the charter schools, and so we incorporated it slightly differently. Also, we talked about creating a sort of a governance group or some kind of a steering committee, if you will, to kind of vet the projects the charter school needs and so we assembled a group of charter school leaders and to seek input from them and sort of, on how to best pursue, because each charter school is unique in its nature, has a unique mission, just like a lot of our traditional public schools are. And so this Charter School Facilities Committee was formed to help us, look at the needs, address the needs, and sort of provide guidance on the projects that would help renovate and revitalize their facilities at the charter schools. So that started with Proposition Z, and then it carried on through the next two ballot measures with YY and U, and so it's been a very successful model. It's a very unique model, and so projects. What the district does is we look to the charter schools themselves to tell us what they need. Those needs come in the form of projects to the committee. The committee then, or project proposals, if you will, and the committee sort of reviews them, validates them. And the committee is made up of charter school leaders that are experienced leaders, and staff also. Our facility staff sort of also helps facilitate that. And then ultimately we take those projects to the board approves the projects, and then we begin to develop those projects. And we've had a lot of really amazing, successful projects through that process. And I think it helps us. I learn a lot listening to that committee, being a part of that. I don't sit on that committee, but I help facilitate it. But it just being in the room with all those educational leaders, there's just a lot of experience around the table, and I learn a lot about education through osmosis in those meetings. And I think it's really a great process. It is very unique for us, probably across the state. It certainly might be a model for others to look at and see if it fits their needs too.
Well, and I think, and I've been in charters a long time. I think this is year 30. So my career is almost as old as the charter law in California. And, in many parts of the state, and it may be this way in other states as well, the relationship between authorizer and charter can become fraught with at times conflict, or can be antagonistic. And I think what has been so inspiring in my experience in San Diego has been that not only a bond partnership, but also partnership with the charter school office, unfailingly, while there's no way we're never going to have disagreements, but unfailingly there's a recasting to focus on the needs of kids. And when I tell people at charter school conferences how, for example, in my case, Albert Einstein has benefited, our students have benefited, our families have benefited from facilities, I get strange looks from charter school leaders who are not in San Diego. Right? They're trying to find ways to finance facilities, and oftentimes they're paying 20 and 30 cents on the dollar of every dollar of revenue, 20, 30 cents. I mean, imagine if you did that in your home mortgage, you don't have much room, right, in your budget. And so that's just a beautiful thing. And I'm not pandering just because you and I are talking here. I say it very often that it's been the real privilege of my professional career. I always say I'm kind of in the 7th or 8th inning of it right now, to be able to participate in the CSFC and to see what's happening all over with partnerships. I started my teaching career at the Harriet Tubman School, and I remember, for example, that's just one. I drive by there sometimes, and there's a shared use field with the city that for my whole time there was decomposed granite. It was like the Kalahari out there, hot days, East County, right?
Yeah.
And now it's a turf field.
Yeah.
And they're getting a lot of projects done there and all over the county. And I think we don't celebrate that enough, that partnership. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm glad that it's been a good experience from your perspective, because that's really our goal. Our goal is for to not be a burden on the charter leaders, and to support them, because you've got it busy enough. It's hard enough to run a school. I do the same thing with traditional principals, and also that we create supportive environments that are, and we are, transforming like that decomposed granite field at Harriet Tubman and the facilities there. I mean, those kids deserve better. And they're amazing kids, and I'm glad we were able to make that change and make those improvements in their lives, and those teachers and those families that we've impacted positively.
Shifting gears a little bit, what goals do you have professionally, let's say over the next 10 years? I know you're not the goal setter in the sky, right? But when you sit around and you envision where your work is going to be in 10 years, and then where your life personally is going to be in 10 years. What does that look like?
Well, I want to leave the schools all the schools in San Diego Unified, all the traditional schools, all the charter schools in a state of good repair and in good condition. And I want them all to be places where kids can learn effectively, where they can grow, and they can places that facilitate the direction that they want to go in terms of their lives and their educational careers and support that for the next generation. So I want us to get back to a state of good repair everywhere. We are getting there. We've done a lot, and we've been doing a lot of work with school safety in terms of physical safety for kids, because the world's a different place than when we were kids. And we used to have open campuses, and kids walked to school. Now, children are getting dropped off at school. We don't have, our campuses are fully fenced. It's a different world in terms of safety. In terms of technology, we talked about that and how much that has changed. In terms of supporting younger kids, and we're now supporting 4-year-olds. So I want to be able to give all those 4-year-olds. We have pretty much added another grade in the state of California. So now we have universal transitional kindergarten.
Air conditioning.
Yes, the world's gotten hotter. We're more sustainable. I don't think we even touched on that. No. We're trying to get to net zero so that we at least do not contribute negatively to the carbon footprint of this planet in terms of operating our schools. So, creating solar systems and electric vehicle chargers and all the infrastructure that'll help make this a cleaner planet. We'll at least doing our share, our part. So my professional goal is to take us to that point where we're in a state of good repair. We're in a good place. I want to be able to pass on, the physical plan of this district and make it, and hand it off in a much better state than when I arrived here. When not much had been done since those schools were built for the baby boom generation, and so that's sort of my big picture goal, sort of big in terms of completing the mission and putting us in a better place.
What do you do outside of work to keep the energy up? I mean, I see you in meetings and you got 2 cell phones going at all times, and we're in a meeting, and then your assistant comes in and taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, Lee," and then you have a busy life. You have a lot of spinning platters. What do you do just to recharge?
Well, you know what I do. Like a lot of times when the day is done, I go home. I've got a very supportive wife and 2 kids. My daughter's already out of the house, I'm a grandfather now.
Wow, congratulations!
So
that'll reset your priorities, right?
Yeah. My daughter's married 2 years ago, and now I'm a grandpa. So that keeps me young, and I love to see. There's nothing like seeing a child discover the world through a child's eyes. You just the things that we take for granted, right. that the new discovery that there is in that age. So what I often do, we'll go and take a walk on the beach. I like to go. We don't live near the beach, but I often I'll come home if I get home in a decent hour, and I love to, especially when the days are longer, like right now, and there's low tide, and you can go take a walk on the beach, go grab a bite afterwards. That's a weekday, and I like to ski. I like to travel. I like to work, though. My dad said my grandfather was addicted to work. He was always working. Didn't have many hobbies. I do like to work, and I don't mind working on the weekends like I do. It drives my wife crazy sometimes, but even when we're on vacation, sometimes I'm answering emails and stuff. But I do enjoy it. If you fall in love with a mission, then it's not really work, for me. And so I don't mind. I don't mind. It's not like a burden. It's sometimes I'd rather be caught up and stay engaged in the projects. The more it takes a lot of energy. In order to make these projects run smoothly, you have to stay involved and understand every one of them. That's the other thing is, but I do have some. I enjoy that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I used to golf, but I messed up my back, so I don't golf as much as I did. I don't golf at all lately, but skiing and walking and just hanging out with family and traveling, stuff like that. So I like nature, so I really admire nature, and I also like different cultures. it's interesting to see life through the lens of different cultures, like how they see life. We have our, American view of the world, and then but looking through the eyes of how life looks through other lenses is kind of interesting, because life is such a interesting thing, and how you look at it, and our existence. So anyway,
what would your current self tell your 21-year-old self? I guess I chose 21 because that was approximate college graduation age. What would your current self tell your 21-year-old Lee about what lies ahead? What advice would you give him?
Oh, what advice would I give myself?
Yeah, like if you could go back and you saw yourself, graduating from San Diego State.
I guess I would tell myself to stay flexible. Continue to work hard. At the time, I was already working really hard, so I did. But staying flexible and staying and not. I think at that phase in life, you have an idea of what you have, a dream, you have an idea of where you think you want to go exactly. And we're not always in control of that dream, so you just don't know. So just to stay open to, the opportunities that lie ahead, and to be humble. I don't know if I was that humble at that stage in my life, to be humble, to be collaborative with other people. I think, to really like admire or understand the worth of everyone else, the value that everyone else, we are this big society with lots of different roles, and everyone's important regardless of what you do or how you do it. But I think that flexibility is key, because a lot of people get out of college, and I was probably no different than any, that they think, oh, I've got this roadmap, I know exactly where I'm going, and then life takes you in a different direction.
Then someone calls you up and says, "Hey, I got this school district thing," and you're like, "I'm not interested. Just come check it out."
Yeah, exactly. And here I am, and who'd have thought, I never would have guessed, never in a million years would have guessed where I'd be going. I just wouldn't have ever thought that this is where I belonged, but I do belong here, and I do love the mission. So, that it's just interesting how I got there, how it all happened.
It's interesting that there are a lot of people who I ask that question to, and as they recount their life's journey, they talk about the small, at the time, fairly insignificant. There's no way you would have known that was going to be a left turn off the freeway when you thought you were going right, but it changed the rest of your life for the better. And oftentimes we have these experiences, right, where I remember I had a summer job in college, and I was $2.50 an hour in 1991. And I remember, because there were no jobs, but I got cash under the table. And I remember one day I was up on the ladder, and the woman who I was working for said, "What are you going to do after college?" I said, I think I'm going to go to law school. And she said, "What do you mean you think?" And I said, "Yeah, whatever. I'm going to go to law school." She said, "Hold on." And she went into the house, came out and handed me a flyer. And it was a flyer for a fellowship. And I ended up applying for it, getting the fellowship, went abroad for a year and a half, and it completely changed my whole career and life trajectory. And had I thrown that thing out, not paid attention to this woman, I don't know, my life might have turned out fine and good, but it would have been different.
That's amazing. Yeah. Where did you go?
I spent a year and a half in Central America and Southern Mexico, researching the experience of what it at the time was like to be a refugee. So this grant through the Thomas J. Watson Foundation, which is the founding family of IBM, the Watson.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It gave me the financial underwriting to be able to do that. I otherwise would never have been able to have that luxury. So I essentially took a gap year after college before starting a career, but it shifted
opened your eyes
it shifted
to
the
something,
career.
yeah.
I learned to speak Spanish, different perspective on the world, different perspective on the United States. It probably had a big role to play in where I ended up living in the United States, because I'm originally from the East Coast. I ended up in San Diego. I wanted to be near an international border. So a lot of pieces, right? We don't at the time see it. I'm sweating up on a ladder. I was painting or something.
Yeah.
And she goes, "Here's a flyer." It boom, shifts. Yeah, it shifts.
Just one little thing.
One little thing.
Now it is all these little forks in the road, and you don't know. You never know when they're coming at you or to you, and which direction you're going to take, and what that fork will take you to.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you just have to be open to that. And,
that's right.
And so, it's amazing. Think what that happened in your life, and here you are, so.
Yeah, it's been a journey. You've been very generous with your time, and I just have one last question for you.
Okay.
We're going to tailor it to your line of work. So let's say you're finishing a big, school construction project, and you just installed a marquee out in front, and Lee Dulgeroff gets to create a message to the world about what he believes, what he thinks is important in life. I normally ask people what they would create for a billboard on the side of the freeway, but I'm trying to make this school related. So you have your big marquee. What does your marquee say to the world about your message, about what you find to be important in this life?
Well, I'm thinking about right now, we have so much going on in the world with the war in Ukraine and the war in Gaza, and just there's always seems to be wars, and we have tragedies and genocides and all kinds of strife. I mean, I guess to me, and even locally, there's tension all the time. Different, I think my message to the world is to be kind to each other, be empathetic, be kind, try to understand the other person, because so if I had to give a message to someone, it's like have some compassion, because I think that's what the world needs more of right now, considering what's going on, and and throughout history we've seen that. So if anything, that would be my message.
I think that's an apropos place to finish the conversation. Be kind, be empathetic. I've always been impressed in working with you about the degree to which you go to listen and to pay attention, even though I know you're very busy, but every question I've ever had, you take the time to answer. And so I think that kindness comes through, and I really appreciate that. And thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you, David. That was great.
Thank you for listening to the Superintendent's Hangout. You can follow me on Twitter at DVS1970. Please be sure to share this show with friends and family on social media and in the real world. Thank you to Brad Bacayal for editing and production assistance, and to Tina Royster for scheduling and logistics. Thanks for hanging out, and have a great day.